Hola, soy Papalucas y aquí en un nuevo directo, esta vez lo he querido hacer en mi canal. Como ya sabéis, o si no lo sabéis os lo digo yo, estoy haciendo bastantes directos en el canal de Twitch. Y luego los paso a mi canal. Normalmente no los paso directamente tal como lo he hecho, aunque en el futuro intentaré editar y solo dejar lo más importante. Porque si no pueden ser vídeos muy largos, de 2 horas, de 1 hora. Bueno, dicho esto, ¿por qué voy a hacer un directo ahora en YouTube? ¿Y qué es lo que voy a hacer en directo? Mira, este juego, Esther, bueno, no Esther, es un juego que lo acaban de poner gratis. Yo lo iba siguiendo y estaba por 9 euros. Y no sé, de la noche a la mañana lo han puesto gratis. ¿Qué tipo de juego es este? Simulador de caminar. Como casi la mayoría de supervivencia, no vamos a negarnos. Indie, ambiente y misterio. Pero lo más importante es los comentarios. Extremadamente, creo que ponía extremadamente positivo. Mayormente positivo. Mayormente positivo. Y dicen que este juego no es para la gente que busca acción. Es una experiencia nueva. Importante. Tienes problemas para concentrarte, te distraes fácilmente, te aburres sin motivo inteligente, si no sabes apreciar cosas ajenas a tu estilo de vida y no puedes adoptarlo como una experiencia única si nunca has leído algo completo, ahórrate el tiempo y ve a otro juego. O sea, dicen que es una experiencia diferente, que no es el típico juego, es más, no sé cómo decirlo, no es un juego de acción, digamos, es de observar, de ver el paisaje, de patear, porque como ahí lo dice, un simulador de camino. Y bueno, y está gratis. Yo hacía tiempo que lo seguía y digo, bueno, si sale una oferta barata, 2 euros, 3 euros, porque a veces lo ponían a ese euro, pues igual me lo compro. Y bueno, y digo, voy a probarlo, igual que lo pruebo, si me gusta, sigo la serie y lo pongo, si me decís que la siga, o si no lo hago jugándolo sin grabar. Es un juego atípico. De hecho, más que un videojuegos, podría considerarse como una experiencia. Este juego marcó un antes y un después en el mundillo, puesto que es el primer en su género conocido como Walking Simulator. Si buscas acción o emociones fuertes, este no es tu juego. Se trata de un título para jugar pausadamente, disfrutar de cada detalle, explorar, escuchar toda y cada una de las narraciones del protagonista. O sea, va a ser un juego lento, digamos, pero eso no significa nada. Y un juego diferente. Pues bueno, el que lo quiera probar está gratis, o el que quiera ver mi vídeo para ver si le va a gustar. Y bueno, vamos a darle, vamos a ver qué tipo de juego es y a ver si nos gusta a todos. Yo lo tenía puesto en mi lista, no sé si sabéis que podéis tener una lista de deseados, para cuando saliera barato. Me dio por entrar y digo, hostia, está gratis. Aparte, solo ocupa 1,5 GB. Poquísimo. Supuestamente, voces en inglés, Lo que pasa que está subtitulado al español, ¿vale? Inicio. Bueno. Comentario de los directores. El Faro, vamos.
Dear Esther, I sometimes feel as if I've given birth to this idea.
Vamos a ver, opciones. Vídeo. Vamos ahí atrás, otra vez. Salía el menú principal, confirmar. Opciones, sonido, subtítulo grande, desactivado, activado. Esto no sé lo que significa. Escena, subtítulo, activado, hecho. Y vamos a empezar. Vamos a ver, porque si está en inglés y al menos si real, no. Inicio, empezamos.
Dear Esther, I've lost track of how long I've been here and how many visits I have made overall. Certainly the landmarks are now so familiar to me that I have to remind myself.
Atrás. Salir. Volvemos a entrar. Vamos a ver, porque... El problema está que si es un juego que hay que leer la historia, pues la puedo leer. Pero el problema es si está en inglés. Vamos a verlo. Las opciones otra vez, a ver si me he equivocado en alguna... opciones. Sonido. No sé, vamos a poner activado. Subtítulo grande activado, hecho. Vídeo. Hecho. Idioma, español. Hecho. Está todo bien. Tendría que salir el subtítulo. Hecho. Atrás. Inicio. Comentarios de directores, no sé. Vamos a poner un inicio.
Hello everyone, I'm Dan Pinchbeck, I'm the creative director of The Chinese Room, and this is the Dear Esther Developers Commentary.
Hi, I'm Robert Briscoe, I'm the artist on Dear Esther.
And I'm Jessica Curry, and I was the composer on the game.
So what you're looking at today is a remake of a mod. Dear Esther started off in 2007 as a Half-Life 2 mod that did really, really well in the modding community, which was fantastic, and as a result of that attracted the attention of Rob, who worked as the primary developer on...
So you'll see around you in a lot of the environments, there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined with the VOs and the music and stuff, I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments. So if you look around you, you'll see that there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces, a piece of paper with someone's name on it, a photograph, an ultrasound. All of these little bits and pieces are kind of layered in to just kind of bring another aspect of the story into the game. And also, they're actually randomized, so every time you play, you'll see something different lying around. And this is just to build on this idea that everybody has a unique experience and a unique interpretation of the story. So you'll see around you in a lot of the environments, there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined with the VOs and the music and stuff, I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments. So if you look around you, you'll see that there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces, a piece of paper with someone's name on it, a photograph, an ultrasound. All of these little bits and pieces are kind of layered in.
Opciones, teclado.
In to just kind of bring another aspect of the story into the game. And also, they're actually randomized, so every time you play, you'll see something different lying around. And this is just to build on this idea that everybody has a unique experience and a unique interpretation of the story.
Voy a ir por aquí arriba primero. Bueno, los gráficos me molan. Pasa que no correr, es muy diferente. Allí hay cosas para ver. Hay que ir por aquí abajo, ¿no? Ah, ahí estamos.
Part of the point about the whole game, I think, was this idea that rather than having a linear, straight-through version of the story, that we could have multiple story units for each place you were. And I was really interested in this idea of how you can open up that space that people can interpret. So I loved the idea.
Voy a quitar esto, tío, porque esto... Voy a empezar de nuevo. Atrás. Salir al menú principal, confirmar. Inicio.
Dear Esther, the morning after I was washed ashore, salt in my ears, sand in my mouth, and the waves always at my ankles, I felt as though everything had conspired to this one last shipwreck. I remembered nothing but water, stones in my belly and my shoes, threatening to drag me under to where only the most listless of creatures swim.
de cangrejos, parece.
When you were born, your mother told me, a hush fell over the delivery room. A great red birthmark covered the left side of your face. No one knew what to say, so you cried to fill the vacuum. I always admired you for that you cried to fill whatever vacuum you found. I began to manufacture vacuums just to enable you to deploy your talent. The birthmark faded by the time you were 6 and had gone completely by the time we met, but your fascination with the empty and its cure remained.
Puedo ir por aquí o puedo ir por aquí. Hay que ir por aquí.
The mount is clearly the focal point of this landscape. It almost appears so well placed as to be artificial. I find myself easily slipping into the delusional state of ascribing purpose, deliberate motive to everything here. Was this island formed during the moment of impact? When we were torn loose from our moorings and the seatbelts cut motorway lanes into our chests and shoulders, did it first break surface then? When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff paths died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this: to keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh. We are not like Lot's wife, you and I. We feel no particular need to turn back. There's nothing to be seen if we did. No tired old man parting the cliffs with his arms. No gifts or Bibles laid out on the sand for the taking. No tides turning or the shrieking gulls overhead. The bones of the hermit are no longer laid out for the taking. I have stolen them away to the guts of this island, where the passages all run to black, and where we can light each other's faces by their strange luminescence. Dear Esther, I met Paul. I made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life. I would leave you presents outside your retreat, in this interim space between cliff and beach. I would leave you loaves and fishes, but the fish stocks have been depleted and I've run out of bread. I would row you back to your homeland in a bottomless boat, but I fear we would both be driven mad by the chatter of the sea creatures.
Se puede ir por aquí. Si os fijáis en todos los sitios ahí, los botes de pintura esos, tío, como resplandecientes. Allí donde salí en el faro.
He still maintains he wasn't drunk, but tired. I can't make the judgment or the distinction anymore. I was drunk when I landed here, and tired too. I walked up the cliff path in near darkness and camped in the bay where the trawler lies beached. It was only at dawn that I saw the bothy and decided to make my temporary lodgings there. I was expecting just the aerial and a transmitter stashed in a weatherproof box somewhere on the mount. It had an air of uneasy permanence to it. Like all the other buildings here, erosion seems to have evaded it completely.
Dios. Cargando. Logros desbloqueados.
Dear Esther, I have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times. But although I have all the reports and all the witnesses and have cross-referenced them within a millimetre using my ordnance survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
puede entrar al barco o no se puede entrar al barco. A explorar. El muñeco no salta ni hace nada. Bueno, pues vamos a investigar por ahí, ya que no puedo ir al barco.
I had kidney stones, and you visited me in the hospital. After the operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk.
Pues, una cabañita ahí.
I've begun to climb, away from the sea and towards the center. It is a straight line to the summit, where the evening begins to coil around the aerial and squeeze the signals into early silence. The bothy squats against the mount to avoid the gaze of the aerial. I too will creep under the island like an animal and approach it from the northern shore. The bothy was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jakobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either. Three cormorants seen at dusk. They did not land. This house built of stone, built by a long-dead shepherd. Contents: my camp bed, a stove, a table, chairs, my clothes, my books. The caves that score out the belly of this island, leaving it famished. My limbs and belly famished. This skin, these organs, this failing eyesight. When the battery runs out in my torch, I will descend into the caves and follow only the phosphorescence home.
casa no la he explorado. Me deja subir por ahí. Dios. ¿Por qué no me deja subir por ahí? Voy a probar otra vez. Intentar ir por ese camino que quiero ir. No, no te deja subir. No te deja subir, pues solo queda bajar. Dios, si me caigo ahí, mira, hay una cueva ahí abajo.
He left his body to the medical school and was duly opened out for a crowd of students 21 days after his passing. The report is included in my edition of his book. The syphilis had torn through his guts like a drunk driver, scrambling his organs like eggs on a plate. But enough definition remained for a cursory examination, and, as I suspected, they found clear evidence of kidney stones. He's likely to have spent the last years of his life in considerable pain. Perhaps this is the root of his laudanum habit. Although its use makes him an unreliable witness, I find myself increasingly drawn into his orbit.
Logro desbloqueado.
From here, this last time, I have understood there is no turning back. The torch is failing along with my resolve. I can hear the singing of the sea creatures from the passages above me, and they are promising the return of the gulls.
Hongos.
I am traveling through my own body, following the line of infection from the shattered femur towards the heart. I swallow fistfuls of painkillers to stay lucid. In my delirium, I see the twin lights of the moon and the Ariel shining to me through the rocks.
Dios. No me deja ir por aquí.
This is a drowned man's face reflected in the moonlit waters. It can only be a dead shepherd who has come to drunk drive you home.
Dios. Dios. ¡Ah! Se ha ido, no quería ir por ahí. ¿Dónde estoy? No sé dónde estoy, tío. Cosas más raras, tío. Logro desbloqueado. Hemos salido. Uf, qué guapo la luna, tío.
I wish I could have known Donnelly in this place. We would have had so much to debate. Did he paint these stones or did I? Who left the pots in the hut by the jetty? Who formed the museum under the sea? Who fell silently to his death into the frozen waters? Who erected this godforsaken aerial in the first place? Did this whole island rise to the surface of my stomach, forcing the gulls to take flight?
ves. Qué guapo, tío.
Soil, I chose fire. It seemed the more contemporary of the options, the more sanitary. I could not bear the thought of the reassembly of such a ruin. Stitching arm to shoulder and femur to hip, charting a line of thread like traffic stilled on a motorway, making it all acceptable for tearful aunts and traumatized uncles flown in specially for the occasion. Reduce to ash, mix with water, make a phosphorescent paint for these rocks and ceilings.
Como ya decían en los comentarios, un juego para tomárselo
All
con
by the
calma.
roadside, by the exit for Damascus, all ticking and cooled, all feathers and remorse, all of these signals routed like traffic through the circuit diagrams of our guts, those badly ridden boats torn bottomless in the swells, washing us forever ashore. From here, I can see my armada. I collected all the letters I'd ever meant to send to you, if I'd have ever made it to the mainland, but had instead collected at the bottom of my rucksack, and I spread them out along the lost beach. Then I took each and every one, and I folded them into boats. I folded you into the creases, and then, as the sun was setting, I set the fleet to sail. Shattered into 21 pieces, I consigned you to the Atlantic, and I sat here until I'd watched all of you sink.
Por ahí arriba podemos ir, pero vamos a ir a ver esto. Barquitos, tío. ¿Puede ir uno al agua, tío? Sí.
When Paul keeled over dead on the road to Damascus, they resuscitated him by hitting him in the chest with stones gathered by the roadside. He was lifeless for 21 minutes, certainly long enough for the oxygen levels in his brain to have decreased and caused hallucinations and delusions of transcendence. I'm running out of painkillers, and the moon has become almost unbearably bright.
Ahí no hay alguien. Alguien o algo, tío. Dios. Hola, Alex.
I've begun my
hola.
voyage in a paper boat without a
Un
bottom.
juego súper rarísimo que estoy
Flight of the
probando,
moon in it.
que lo tenía siguiendo
I've
hace
been
mucho
folded
tiempo,
along
valía
a
10
creasing
euros.
time, a
Lo han puesto
weakness in the
gratuito.
sheet of life. Now you've settled on the opposite side of the paper to
Y bueno,
be.
estamos probándolo a ver
You can see your
qué
traces
tal
in
es.
the ink that soaks through the fiber, the pulped vegetation. When we become waterlogged and the cage disintegrates, we will intermingle. When this paper aeroplane leaves the cliff edge and carves parallel vapor trails in the dark, we will come together.
Que había, yo vi un tío desde allí, tío. Como un juego de exploración rarísimo en una isla desierta, Dios. Que no puedes correr, que no puedes tocar nada. Dios, que se está haciendo más de noche.
If only Donnelly had experienced this, he would have realized he was his own shoreline, as am I. Just as I am becoming this island, so he became his syphilis, retreating into the burning synapses, the stones, the infection.
No es que no pueda ir más rápido, es que no se puede correr, tío. Es como que tienes que disfrutar el juego. Los sonidos, los gráficos, todo, tío. No hay nada que puedas leer ni que
Returning
puedas
to my car afterwards, hands still
interactuar.
shaking, and a head split open by the impact. Goodbye to tearful aunts and traumatized uncles. Goodbye to the phenomenal. Goodbye to the tangible. Goodbye Wolverhampton. Goodbye Sanford. Goodbye Cromer. Goodbye Damascus. This cliff path is slippery in the dew. It is hard to climb with such an infection. I must carve out the bad flesh and sling it from the aerial. I must become infused with the very air.
Dios, guapo.
A gull perched on a spent bonnet, sideways, whilst the sirens fell through the middle distance and the metal moaned in grief about us. I'm about this night in walking, old bread and gull bones, old Donnelly at the bar gripping his drink, old Esther walking with our children, old Paul as ever, old Paul. He shakes and he shivers and he turns off his lights alone. I have run out of places to climb. I will abandon this body and take to the air. Dear Esther, I have burnt my belongings, my books, this death certificate. Mine will be written all across this island. Who was Jakobsen? Who remembers him? Donnelly has written of him, but who was Donnelly? Who remembers him? I have painted, carved, hewn, scored into this space all that I could draw from him. There will be another to these shores to remember me. I will rise from the ocean like an island without bottom, come together like a stone, become an aerial, a beacon, that they will not forget you. We have always been drawn here. One day the gulls will return and nest in our bones and our history. I will look to my left and see Esther Donnelly flying beside me. I will look to my right and see Paul Jakobsen flying beside me. They will leave white lines carved into the air to reach the mainland, where help will be sent.
Dios. Bueno, esto es el juego. No sé lo que... ¿Qué puta juego es este, tío? Una locura, tío. Por lo menos no es muy largo, pero es una puta locura, tío. No sé si a lo mejor hay más partes, o yo qué sé, o te haces esta y luego te vas a otro. Es una puta locura, tío, el juego. Dios. Al menos me ha sorprendido, ¿vale? Que muchos juegos ni me sorprenden. Vamos a ver si hay una continuación, porque había como fotos. No sé si yo me he hecho todo el juego o son secciones, tío, del juego, tío. Es que es rarísimo, tío. Vamos a esperar a que pasen todos los créditos. Pero, tío, cuando dicen, este juego es una experiencia única. Es única, tío. Es puta idea del puto juego, tío. Vamos a ver si... No acabe los créditos porque no los puedo quitar. No los puedo quitar. A ver, si el juego solo es esto, estaba en Steam por 9 euros. Normal que lo hayan puesto gratis. Porque si solo es lo que hemos visto, 9 euros, no sé. Sí, muy bonito y tal. Y una experiencia, oh... Reanudar.
Dear Esther, I have now driven the stretch of...
Pues bueno, el juego es lo que hemos visto. No es muy largo, no te vas a agobiar. Está gratis en Steam. Si quieres tener una experiencia mística, como dicen en los comentarios. Y bueno, yo me he quedado todo loco con este juego. Bueno, y espero que os haya gustado el juego y el vídeo. Y hasta otro nuevo vídeo.